evening, ladies and gentlemen, and everyone. Hello, hello. Thank you so much for joining us tonight at this performance of African Exodus. What a show, yeah? But it's not a show, but what a company. How amazing. My name is Mayan Wong. I'm the Director of Producing and Programming here at the Perelman Performing Arts Center, PAC NYC. Thank you so much for being here tonight. And on behalf of PAC NYC and our co-presenters, Foundation Cartier, we're just so happy that you're here and invite you to stay for a post-show conversation that will follow in just a few minutes. I urge you to stay. And I'm just so very honored to introduce to you Neo Muyanga, who's the impresario for the Center for the Less Good Idea from Johannesburg in South Africa, who produced African Exodus, as well as Souleymane Bachir Diagne, professor in the Department of French and Philosophy at Columbia University from Senegal, who will be discussing the themes. And you can learn more about them and their illustrious work in the digital program. Their bios are in there. But again, welcome. Thank you. You're in for a treat. Thank you for joining us.
Here we are. Good evening. Thank you very much for joining us tonight for this performance of African Exodus, and for all of you who joined us earlier in the lobby for Sounds of Limpopo. It's a joy to be here in New York City. It's an incredible privilege to be hosted by this center here at PAC NYC. A very important, incredibly meaningful part of the city. And I'm so glad to be with my dear friend and elder here, Souleymane. Nanga Dev.
Mangi fi alhamdulillah. Jàmm rek. Sant Yàlla amiin.
Senegal Negna.
Actually, it reminds me our conversation, because we met and we had a conversation that was Sunday at Le Monde near my university. Thank you for coming Upper West Side.
It's a pleasure.
I know it is quite a trip when you are here downtown.
It's a pleasure.
And we exchanged from a corner of Africa to another corner of Africa. You heard from the language we just exchanged that I am from Senegal. We spoke Wolof. We greeted each other in Wolof. So I am on that cape, the Cape Green, the Cap Verde or Cabo Verde. Right. And you are at another cape of Africa, so the distance is great.
Yes.
Geographically, linguistically, because most of the languages that we heard are Bantu languages. Yes. And Bantu, the Bantu people were celebrated as well, the migration of the Bantu people. Yes. And in West Africa, our languages belong to the family known as West Atlantic languages. So the distance, linguistic distance also is quite important. And this sumptuous performance that we saw and heard just bridged those differences. And this is what was so moving for me, witnessing this performance. The way in which from one corner of Africa to the next corner of Africa, the migration took place, melted languages into each other. Actually, reading the presentation, I could see that they were speaking many different languages, but they were so blended together. I had the feeling that they were just using and singing one single African language. You have invented the African language.
I mean, the makers of this project, Sibusiso Shozi, who's the composer, and Nhlanhla Mahlangu, who's the director, and the cast really, I think, outdid themselves because they did exactly that. They crossed all these borders of politics, of history, of culture. Because, when we are away from the continent, everybody thinks that we are all from the same village.
Right.
People are constantly asking me, do you know so-and-so from Lagos? And sometimes you say, yeah, sure. Sure, I know that person. It's a huge place. It's a huge place. And for us, South Africans who lived for many years under the dispensation of apartheid, the tragedy we grew up in is, of course, we were exceptionalized. We were separated from the rest of the continent and told we were different and we didn't have too much to do with the continent. Even though a lot of the continent supported the struggle against apartheid, we were a pariah state and couldn't travel easily. The easy travel, in fact, was to London and to all the other capitals of the world that were in collaboration with the system. So it was only at the arrival of the democratic dispensation that the travel was becoming more available to us. And then, of course, the boundaries to cross that are left are to do with the colonial impositions. So the Francophone part, that's the other difference between us. I remember the first time I went to the Congo and we couldn't find a common language. I couldn't speak Lingala at that point. And this person who looked very much like me says to me, you, English man, me, French man. I said, no.
Yeah. At Le Monde, I took a coffee. I was expecting you to have tea.
That's because we met at 3 o'clock, not 4 o'clock.
Colonialism works.
And I think it's been such a pleasure also because Senegal is one of those places that I often think, any day now I'm going to move there. I've planned to move to Dakar for years, and I think I might do that. When you retire and you move back, I'll come and live in your basement.
Absolutely. Good. No. I have room for you, I'm an empty nester, so all my kids are out. We have plenty of rooms for our friends.
I'll be there. I mean, I think the tragic background and context for this story also is that the center which I work with, the Center for the Let's Go Idea, which is the formation ground of this piece. We are an incubator in downtown Johannesburg. Johannesburg is called the African metropolis because we are home to many Africans who've crossed borders to join us. And there's a huge misunderstanding about, in fact, what we share. And I'm sure you've seen the stories. You've been to South Africa many times. And we have talked about how we are still fighting this rift that was manufactured for us about the differences that we have. And I think work like this, for me, is one of the ways that we transcend some of those boundaries. We transcend some of our shadow. But then to bring it to New York, and I wanted to catch up with you here, because New York for us is an incredibly important ground, because this was the stomping ground for many iconic figures like Miriam Makeba, like Hugh Masekela, who were in exile here for many years. I've got a friend of mine here who leads a very important institution called Kara here in Chelsea. And right around the corner from there is the hotel where Miriam Makeba used to live. It's also the place where Abdullah Ibrahim had his rehearsal and home space for 30 years. Abdullah Ibrahim, who was famously quoted in the film by Chris Austin for saying, South Africa is the only country to win a revolution in 4-part harmony. And what he meant by that, of course, is that we are a musicking people. Music becomes a verb for us. We are musicking through history, through social duress. But it's also a reference, particularly with 4-part harmony, the soprano, the alto, the tenor, and the bass, of course, to the colonial intrusion and to missionary schooling. And in a sense, we are hybrid people because we speak these many different languages, which I think you detect also in this program.
indeed. And speaking of which, the way you mentioned earlier, apartheid, this is also something that of a connection that we had from one corner of the continent to the next corner, because as you know, when there were secret, not so secret, talks about the best way to end apartheid in a smooth way, as much as it could be smooth, Dakar was central to it. Actually, not Dakar, but this island facing Dakar, which is the island of Gore, where there was the Gore Institute, and many conversations between the then government of South Africa and the ANC took place in the Gore Institute, and your good friend Perelman Bach, the writer, was very influential in those talks, and actually Gore became his home in a way. So this is the reason why also you are at home when you come to Senegal indeed. And you mentioned also the end of apartheid. To connect that with the way in which somehow this wonderful, sumptuous performance we have heard and witnessed has really created a language of unity for Africa, and I would say even for the world, is that I heard this shout about Abantu, and it moved me very much, because behind Abantu, I also heard Ubuntu, which President Barack Obama famously said was the gift of Mandela and Desmond Tutu and South Africa to the rest of the world. The idea that we have to achieve our humanity together, that the very way in which apartheid is going to end is by jumping out of the logic of apartheid and having the logic of Ubuntu. In a time where our world in general is so fragmented by all these ethno-nationalism that we are seeing all over the world, and with the atrocities that come with that, we definitely need to heed that lesson that we were given. And I believe that the performance we just had the happiness of witnessing is indicating what the power of art is when it comes to evoking such a beautiful notion, such as Ubuntu.
Thank you for that. Ubuntu for us it remains an incredibly important reference point. The idea that I am because you are, the idea of collective reciprocity, collective need, collective movement forward is incredibly profound. I remember we used to have this, we had many slogans about something like one for all. You know, the struggle for liberation was about not for one, but for all of us. And in many ways, it's something I wish we could live truly in this moment. Because I think some of those lessons would be really fundamental to how we live our lives today, in terms of how we cater for one another and treat each other with empathy, with patience, and we find a way to make space for each other. And again, as you say, it's through the making of this work. I mean, when Perelman Bach, who was a dear friend who died recently, introduced me to Ile de Gore, you know, he walked me around, and he was almost like a shadow mayor of that city. They used to call him Tubab.
Yeah.
And I learned how he used to call himself a small little Afrikaans boy who did well because the world was so generous to him, and as a result, he gave back to the world. And so he held the hand of Thabo Mbeki, he held the hand of the people who came from the other side of the political train. And that institute became so fundamental. Many in South Africa don't know that story of what happened in 1987 on Gore and what unfolded from there. And when I went there and found that, I realized that actually home for us is everywhere. And our archive, and this is what I love about this program, African Exodus. Our archive of who we are lives in these multiple spaces. And so the point, almost like the shoes for me, are to go and pick up the clues, to reformulate, to remember who we are. And so it was very significant for me to see this. It's the first time, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, colleagues, but it's the first time that we're performing this piece with a set. Right. And so in a sense, it becomes more itself. It becomes more itself with each iteration, which says a lot about us. We become more ourselves with each rehearsal of who we are, in front of each other, in conversation, in front of witnesses. How are you finding your work? Because you write on Ubuntu, actually. You write philosophically about what this word and this concept means for not just Africa, but what it means for the world.
You are absolutely right. I stole that word from you, but with your permission as well. And I've been working around this notion of Ubuntu with South African friends, philosopher Ramose, who you know probably. And I had also a very good friend, Drusilla. Drusilla Cornell was an American philosopher who lived most of her life in South Africa and was the head of some foundation about Ubuntu, feminist Ubuntu. She insisted that Ubuntu is not just something that is some kind of kumbaya, let's get together, we are the children, we are the world, etc., etc. But it is a movement, it is a fight. You have to work on Ubuntu. Ubuntu is something that you pursue. I know, for example, that the youth in South Africa may be sometimes impatient with Ubuntu because they say, we heard that before and things have not really changed. The structure of inequality is still there. But that doesn't mean that Ubuntu has failed. It means that we need more Ubuntu. We have to pursue it. And the reason why I'm interested in Ubuntu is that I do believe that we are living a time where we need a new form of humanism. We have to dare that word. Because that is the answer to the fragmentation. We had COVID, which means that the virus knows that we are one single humanity. It is time it teaches us that indeed we are one single humanity and we understand that. We are also destroying our planet. We have become a kind of geological force of the kind that made the dinosaur disappear. And the response to that is a politics of humanity. We have to reinvent the notion of a cosmopolitics, a politics of the cosmos, not a politics of our separate nations. And, we are even ignoring diplomacy nowadays. So
we saw that today, right?
And and that is why we have to remind ourselves that there is such a thing as humanity. And I believe that that lesson is really the lesson that 1994 in South Africa taught us. When we saw the old man coming out of prison and holding Winnie Mandela, we did not know what to expect, but we were just moved. And when he gave us the gift of Ubuntu, this idea that being human is not a state, it is a responsibility and a task. We have to achieve our humanity. And as you said, the other component of the notion of Ubuntu is that we do that in reciprocity. As you said, I realize my humanity as you realize yours. And if we understand that first of all, it is a movement towards becoming human. And we fully become human when we become human together. When I am because you are. I think that if we translate that into a politics that we need today, we are going to be really attentive to what we need to do in terms of answering the sanitary challenge, answering also the environmental challenge. And that is also one significance of Ubuntu. I've learned from my Bantu friends that the root untu, meaning both being and force, is also about that. In other words, full humanism is understanding also that we are not alone in this world, that it is the living in general that we have to take into account. So humanism is humanism, the responsibility of the human being for all the living beings also that we share the planet with.
The beauty I find in that is also this question, there's a distinction between owning and belonging, I've always thought. The idea in Ubuntu that is core to that concept is mutual belonging. We belong to each other, we belong to the soil, and that is in contrast to the idea of we own the soil, we own each other, we own this or that. And I feel like that kind of realization sometimes is something we have to keep gifting each other. And I feel like it is in work. Again, I feel to make theater, to make music, is to model what might be possible. I don't know that making speeches is always the ideal way to move forward with an idea. There are people who are better placed than certainly I am to do that. But I think it's in the modeling of what is possible and the modeling of the multiplicities of things that are possible, in fact. So it's not ever one idea, it's not ever one answer. It's the multiplicity that allows us to find generosity, I think, for each other and for the patients. Thank you very much. I really appreciate coming here and spending this time with you. It's been really, really special.
Thank you.
Souleymane Bachir Diagne, we were asked not to take any questions. So it remains for us to say thank you very much for this honor to be here, for the people who've helped us get here, the association between PAC NYC and the Cartier Foundation, and our team here from the office, Rachel Chanoff, and a number of people who've helped us with logistics, the team here for support here backstage, our team from the Center for the Less Good Idea. Thank you, Souleymane Diagne, for really being here and supporting us. Thank you, all of you. Have a great night. Come back again. We have 2 more nights, 2 more performances tomorrow and on Sunday. Please tell your friends, and we'd love to see more of you. Thank you.